Curmudgeon Nation gives you our quick book look into Andy Ngo's book, Unmasked. Now, many of you don't have time to read a book like this, so I want to just tell you how it begins. It begins in the most frightening way a book can begin. It really does. Let me explain. I'm gonna just give you the introduction to the book. The book begins in Portland, Oregon, in June 2019. So Andy Ngo is a journalist, and he's in Portland, and he sees and he goes there, and he's watching all these people dressed in black from head to toe, carrying these flags of the Democratic Socialists of America, marching down the street. Many of them are wearing helmets and carrying melee weapons. The crowds of 400 or 500, and they bring traffic to a standstill. And the police stay away from this whole area. So he's a journalist, Andy Ngo, and he's got his phone. This is the very introduction of the book. He's got his phone, he's got a new GoPro camera, and he's slowly kind of making his way through the crowd toward the front. But a lot of the protesters started recognizing Andy Ngo because he was a journalist who had published some journalism about the group previously that people didn't like who were in the group. So everyone's staring at Andy Ngo, and they're chanting, "No hate, no fear, no hate, no fear." And he doesn't get that much further into the crowd when now he's hit in the back of the head, and he's almost knocked to the ground. And now a sea of bodies, all dressed in black, head to toe, they're surrounding him, and the crowd is chanting, "No hate, no hate, no hate," and they're beating him. As they're chanting "No hate," they're beating him, and they're all covered in black, their headgear. And so his right knee buckles. He goes down to the ground. The attackers are wearing tactical gloves. So they're gloves that are hardened with fiberglass on the knuckles, and some of them probably had brass knuckles, and they're beating him. He puts his hand up to surrender, and they're worse. They beat him worse. Now they grab his camera and they take it away from him, and someone comes up and they knee him twice in the groin, and he falls down, and they bash him over the head with a sign. And now he's bloodied, and he's dazed, and he's bleeding from his ear, and he's got open gash all over his face, and his eyes starting to swell with the blood. And now, but at that point, he's bleeding, he's standing there. Now he's being pelted by eggs and these what are called milkshakes, which are they're made with a concrete mixture, so that when it hits them, it's like a brick. So he's getting hit with these things, and eggs and hard objects on the face and the head. And all of the Antifa around him are all laughing, and he's stumbling away, and cameramen are following him. They're not helping, they're just taking photos, and they're documenting everything. And everyone is screaming, "You're fucking owned, bitch!" And they're screaming at him, and he gets out, and he makes his way to the emergency room, and he's hemorrhaging. His brain is hemorrhaging. There was another guy, right away in the introduction tells you another guy named Adam Kelly that day was hit from behind with an overhead swing by masked militants, because they were trying to help an older man who was being beaten on the ground next to the Pioneer Courthouse. And then so one of this guy's attackers used a baton, and they struck him on the side of the head. It was so hard that you could hear it on the video, and he was lucky to survive. You look at all the people that have been robbed and beaten by Antifa, but people say that they're just against fascists, right? They're good people. They just don't want fascism in the world. Well, here's another one. There's 2 Marine reservists. They're visiting Philadelphia in November, and they were mistaken for being part of the Proud Boys by these Antifa people. And this guy Alejandro Godinez and Luis Torres, they're Latino. And they were called racial slurs by the Antifa nonstop as they were beaten. Well, I thought Antifa would be anti-racist, but evidently not. You know, Andy Ngo then goes in front of Congress in the year that Trump faced Biden on August 4th, 2020. Goes in front of Congress, and he was embedded for years in Antifa, and the whole book explains so many things that are beyond belief terrible. He goes in front of the senators. I don't know if any of you remember. Goes in front of the senators, and he gave his testimony. The Democrats at the time acted so disinterested in what he had to say, and treated him, a journalist, as if he was just some, Republican strolling in to the chamber trashing him. And none of the Democrats asked him any questions. He gave a whole huge testimony about what he saw Antifa do. And the book explains, I'll tell you a few more things that will blow your mind. Here's what the book says. Not one asked me any questions or even acknowledged my presence there. They didn't even say, thank you, Mr. Ngo, for, your testimony in front of the Senate. He says that Senator Hirono, have you seen this one, Hirono? Have you ever watched her in action in public life? You ever seen how she comports herself? Does she seem fair-minded to you? I've never seen someone come across as so vicious and hideously partisan, making no attempt whatsoever to be a leader. But this is Senator Hirono. She repeatedly started reading headlines from The Guardian that said that, oh, Antifa, there's no problem. They're not doing anything. They haven't killed anybody. They're not bad. She goes over and over. Then she storms out of the Senate hearing before she even leaves, and she berates the chairman. I hope this is the end of all this because this is bullshit. She leaves. None of the other Democrats were either in the hearing at all. They had all left. Nobody cared what this man had to say. So in this book that Andy Ngo wrote, he was a public enemy that was getting death threats nonstop by these people. And the book kind of goes into the key players behind Antifa and their strategy and the things that he saw. Let me just tell you one other quick thing. Okay, get this. On May the 6th, 2020, when all the shit went down, you have to think, this is what happened. 2020, Trump is... the virus has just started, 2020. And, Cuomo is out there. Goddamn Governor Cuomo's out there every day with his nipple rings telling us what a leader he is. But anyway, in May 6, 2020 is when that horrible incident happened in Indianapolis where Sean Reed was the 21-year-old guy that got shot and killed by the police. And what happened was there was a high-speed car chase, and the guy, Sean Reed, did a Facebook live stream while he was in the high-speed car chase, so you see it all. And it shows him with this gold and black gun that he had during the chase and all this stuff. And he gets out, he's on foot, he's running from the cops, he's shooting at the cops, they're shooting at him, he's killed. Okay, now, he's killed, he's shot by who? A police officer. Oh, racism, oh my God. But the police officer that shot him was a black police officer. So this is not racism, but it was used as racism. Right away. All these people, they start demanding justice for this innocent person who was shot and killed, totally unarmed, is what they say. Even though he had the gun, it's on the video, all this. They say, oh, yesterday excessive force ended the life of an innocent man who was unarmed, and all the police should be fired. He was murdered in cold blood, is what they said. Don't you know the police are faced with an impossible choice when they have criminals who are firing their weapons at them? They have no choice. But in every single, because it's going to happen in the future. It's going to happen in the future. something's going to happen where they're being shot at. They're going to have to shoot. It's a black guy who's going to be shot. And is it always going to be racism every single time? Are we always going to have looting and rioting? This book, it blew my mind. The stories that it tells, but right after this that happened to this guy in May of 2020, shortly thereafter, 15 days after, was George Floyd, and then everything went to shit. George Floyd, that police officer kneeling on his neck. Oh my God! Everybody was aghast. Every single person in America. They just couldn't believe they're kneeling on this guy's neck. Now, later on, you find out that George Floyd had a fatal level of fentanyl in his blood. It's proven fact. Fatal level of fentanyl in his blood. So that contributed to his behavior and whatever was happening there, but the officer certainly should not have done what he did. They're all fired. All those officers that were standing around that guy, they're all fired. The guy's going to be, taken off to prison. But the rioting started happening right away there in Minneapolis. You remember the rioting started right away. Just massive rioting that reduced all neighborhoods to rubble. All these neighborhoods. But here's what Andy Ngo points out in this book, which is interesting. It's because he was there with them. He found out that, right away, the very first building in the rioting after George Floyd was in Minneapolis, and it was an AutoZone store, and it's right next to the 3rd Police Headquarters. So right away there's a video that shows a male who's dressed in black from head to toe like Antifa, and he's breaking windows one by one using a sledgehammer. He's going along, and he's got a gas mask on, and he's carrying a black umbrella the way that all the Antifa are trained to do, so they can open the umbrella and shield each other so the camera can't see who's doing what. I mean, this is all known. And so anyway, he spray paints on the wall, free shit for everybody, and so everyone runs in there and starts looting it. And the looting and fires that followed set a precedent, started going on and on. So they had these people. But what Antifa does is they go out and they start breaking windows when these racial incidents are occurring. They go to the neighborhoods that will mostly be inflamed, poor inner city neighborhoods, and they start it, and it starts by this breaking of the windows. And it's amazing how he describes what happens. And so the auto parts store is now totally engulfed in flames, and then now a Target nearby, a Target store is broken into. The windows are broken. Everyone's running in there, carrying out everything: TVs, electronics, shoes, everything. A woman in a wheelchair is trying to kind of block the looters, and she's attacked and sprayed with a fire extinguisher. No police came by. The violence spreads throughout Minneapolis that night. Dozens of places are burned to the ground and broken into. An affordable housing unit that was under construction, they set that on fire. It's totally engulfed in flames that reach high to the sky. The flames are so high they melt cars. The rioters, now they surround the Minneapolis 3rd Police Precinct, but the mob's so large that the mayor gives them an order to evacuate and get away from there. So they flee in their vehicles, and the mob storms the building, sets it on fire. This is the Minneapolis Police 3rd Precinct. The mob storms the building, sets it on fire. Then they steal police equipment that was in there and everything. And then hours later, the whole city is burning for hours, and the citizens are fending for themselves. The violence spreads to all these other American cities where you have Antifa that did the same thing. These masked vandals that start breaking windows, and it's a grand scheme of things that gets things going. And they know it because in their literature they describe in their manuals it's called Why We Break Windows: The Effectiveness of Political Vandalism. And it describes, and there's a book you can see online in a PDF form, and it argues that breaking windows is an act of protest against capitalism, white supremacy, and the police. And that as soon as you break a window, it encourages everybody to loot and starts, it's the catalyst that gets everything going. They say, and then everybody in the news, they downplayed it. Remember in 2020, they all downplayed it. The New York Times said that, destroying property, that's not violence. The insurance company can replace it. That's no big deal. You gotta respect them. They're They're against fascism, is what we're told. So you've got the looting and arson. They're not violence. Then you had they're all the Antifa people around. They're the solidarity riots, and then Portland gets going, and that's where Andy Nago in this book really gets rocking and rolling. Portland gets going, and what happens there? You had a police officer. Remember, in St. Louis, David Dorn, a 77-year-old retired police officer, was killed by looters. Then you had that person in Davenport, Iowa, who was shot by the protesters. So you've had violence that's occurring, and it's all, if you look at their literature, it doesn't have to do anything with anti-fascism or it's just about, quote-unquote, fighting for a stateless, anti-capitalist, and prison-free world. These people that are instigating all this stuff all over the country. They go through New York, September 4th, 2020, with a march, with a banner that says "Death to America," and they smash all these windows. And they use their black masks and their umbrellas to shield themselves. It's going to happen again. Whoever the Republican runs in 2024 is going to be branded as a fascist, and the Antifa people are going to go nuts on them. They're all going to be attacked in all these cities, and the same thing is going to happen here. But what's interesting, the last freaking thing I want to say, I want to skip forward. In the book, I'll tell you a cool thing. Here, on September 5th, 2020, rioters marched to attack the East Precinct in Portland, as Andy Nago reports. But that night, they hurl firebombs for the first time at the police. And they've got all these Molotov cocktails. And a mass rioter throws a firebomb in the direction of the police, but it lands short, and it sets two other guys on fire, two of the protesters, and they try to put themselves out. Now the Antifa are hurling mortar fireworks at the officers. Here's an officer hit by an explosive. Another they're hit with rocks. And all the consequences, all the people that are arrested in Portland, they're let out immediately. Their charges are dropped. Their charges are dropped. Here's an Antifa person who was arrested, Asira Butler, who sped off in her car, and she hit a bunch of other vehicles, and she was charged with these things: felony riot, felony failure to perform duties of a driver to an injured person, felony criminal mischief, felony fleeing, reckless driving, and reckless endangering. And all of the charges are all dropped by these liberal prosecutors. So this guy, Andy Nago, what he's describing, that how Antifa does things, and it's just started. That's just the introduction of the book. When he starts to describe how he was embedded with them for years, that's what made him the enemy. He was with them, he saw them, and he publishes everything. And you just wouldn't believe it.